Jalen Myra sat quietly in the cockpit of the stealth cruiser, his hands resting lightly on the controls, though he knew he would barely touch them. Outside, the void of space stretched endlessly, dotted with distant stars and the pale glimmer of moons. The silence was deafening. Every mission had moments like this, moments when time slowed, when a man could feel the weight of the world pressing against his chest. But this mission felt different. This was no ordinary patrol, no standard strike. Jalen had been chosen for something far more dangerous. Something that made him human bait. The message from Fleet Command had been blunt. "You are the key. Lure the Xyrath into our trap. Humanity depends on it. You may not return." The words had been simple, clinical, devoid of comfort. Jalen had read them 3 times before putting the tablet down and staring out into the darkness. Humans had fought wars before, faced threats beyond imagination, but the Xyrath were something else. Entire colonies had been wiped out in hours. Entire fleets had vanished. And now the task of drawing their attention rested on his shoulders. He had been told he was expendable, and yet he had volunteered. Not out of bravado, not out of some naive sense of heroism, but because he understood something fundamental about humans. They fought not just with weapons, but with spirit, with courage, wit, and ingenuity. And if he could survive, even just long enough to give humanity a fighting chance, then perhaps the next generation would live. The briefing had been short. The Xyrath operated as a hive. Their queen directed their every move with an intelligence that was terrifying in its simplicity and efficiency. The swarm was vast, coordinated, and utterly ruthless. Jalen's role was simple in theory: infiltrate the outer reaches of their hive world, deploy a tracker beacon, and retreat while the human fleet prepared an ambush. Easy to say, impossible to guarantee. Every plan assumed the Xyrath would behave predictably. Jalen had learned long ago that nothing about the Xyrath was predictable. The interior of the cruiser hummed softly. Lights blinked in rhythm with the ship's systems, and the low vibration under his seat was a constant reminder that he was alive, moving toward the heart of danger. Behind him, the small squad of elite soldiers he had handpicked checked their weapons, reviewed protocols, and exchanged nervous glances. They had trained for this moment, drilled for months, but the weight of reality pressed on them. Everyone knew the numbers. Everyone knew the odds. "Jalen," said Lieutenant Rhea Voss, her voice calm but carrying the edge of tension he had come to expect from her. "Sensors are picking up unusual energy readings ahead. Could be ambient interference, could be, I don't know. The Queen's domain, maybe." Jalen's eyes narrowed. The Xyrath's energy fields had a way of confusing even the most advanced sensors. Sometimes they caused hallucinations, sometimes they shut down systems entirely, and sometimes they were simply the signature of the hive itself. He didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. He simply nodded. Action would come soon enough. Observation was all he could do now. As they crossed into Xyrath space, the atmosphere, or rather the void they inhabited, seemed to shift. The stars outside no longer appeared distant and scattered. Instead, they seemed to pulse faintly, as though the universe itself was acknowledging their intrusion. The ship's hull creaked subtly, not from physical stress, but from the strange resonance of the hive world's presence. Jalen felt it deep in his chest, a faint thrum, almost like a heartbeat, but cold and alien. "Status?" he asked, breaking the silence that had stretched longer than any of them were comfortable with. "Nothing significant yet," Rhea replied, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "The readings are stable, but they're watching." Jalen did not answer. He already knew they were always being watched. That was the terrifying brilliance of the Xyrath. No human eyes could see their scouts until it was too late. No sensors could detect their probing minds until they had already judged a target. And now, Jalen was that target. He felt it even without a psychic link, even without direct contact. The hive itself seemed to hum with awareness. He was not merely approaching their world. He was under observation, being evaluated. Hours passed in tense silence. The small squad moved like shadows within the ship, preparing weapons, reviewing the beacon deployment procedure, and running simulations in their minds. Jalen watched them. He knew each of their strengths, each of their fears, each of their doubts. And he knew one unshakable truth. The success of this mission depended not just on skill, but on instinct, on split-second decisions, and on trust. Trust in one another and in the resilience that made humans unpredictable. Finally, the first glimpse of the hive world appeared. It was unlike anything Jalen had ever seen. No planet, no rock, no barren wasteland. This was a living structure, enormous, organic, and terrifying. The surface pulsed with iridescent light, ridges and towers twisting in ways that defied normal geometry. It seemed to breathe, to stretch, to shift subtly in response to their presence. Jalen felt a strange sense of awe, mingled with a more pressing fear. This was not a place meant for human feet or for human minds. The beacon was ready. The squad had prepared it for immediate deployment, and Jalen gave a final nod of confirmation. "This is it," he said softly. "Remember, we're not here to fight, at least not yet. Our job is to survive long enough to give the fleet a chance." Rhea glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Survive or die trying?" Jalen let out a small, grim smile. "Let's make it survive for now." They descended into the outer regions of the hive. The ship's stealth systems masked their approach, but Jalen knew the Xyrath would detect them anyway. Detection was not a problem. The hive wanted to know who approached. Curiosity, after all, was part of intelligence, and the Queen was nothing if not intelligent. As they reached the designated drop point, Jalen prepared the beacon. It was small, compact, and packed with enough signal strength to guide the fleet's strike. He activated it with a steady hand, ignoring the way his pulse quickened. Once the beacon was operational, he had only a small window to retreat before the Xyrath noticed the intrusion and reacted. The moment the beacon powered up, a shiver ran through the ship. Sensors went haywire, readings spiking in ways that made no logical sense. The crew exchanged alarmed glances. Jalen's stomach tightened. He had expected resistance, but not this. The hive was aware, and not just aware, responsive. "Prepare for immediate extraction," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension rising in his chest. "Move." The ship lifted, engines humming as they began to pull away from the hive. But then something unprecedented happened. A wave of psychic energy washed over them, not violent, but probing, assessing, calculating. Jalen felt it like a cold hand brushing against his mind. He staggered slightly, clutching the edge of the control panel. His squad froze, some of them wincing under the pressure. "It's reading us," whispered Rhea. "Yes," Jalen replied, forcing his voice to remain calm. "It's curious, not hostile, at least not yet." The psychic presence was unlike anything he had encountered. It was intelligent, aware, and impossibly patient. It probed not just for thoughts, but for fears, memories, and determination. Jalen realized with a chill running down his spine that the Queen herself was observing him, not the soldiers, not the ship, but him, and she was judging. "You think it will attack?" one of the soldiers asked, voice tight. Jalen shook his head slowly. "Not yet, she's deciding. And if we're lucky, she might be intrigued." The seconds stretched into minutes. The ship drifted near the outer edge of the hive's influence, yet every instinct Jalen had told him that danger was closer than it appeared. He could feel the Queen's attention like a weight on his chest, and he forced himself to focus on one truth. Humans survived because they adapted. They thrived because they refused to be predictable. Finally, the psychic pressure eased slightly. The hive shifted, its towers and ridges moving subtly as though breathing. The squad let out quiet breaths, unsure if relief was appropriate or if it was the calm before a storm. Jalen activated the ship's engines fully, guiding them out of the outer hive world's immediate grasp. The beacon would continue transmitting, and the fleet would soon engage. But Jalen's mind remained fixed on one uncomfortable realization. He was no longer just bait. The Queen's observation had changed the stakes. He was being evaluated, and that meant the outcome was uncertain. He could not rely on conventional strategies, on pre-planned tactics, or on pure luck. He would have to think, adapt, and act in ways that no human had before. And deep inside, amidst the tension and fear, a spark of hope flickered. The Queen had not attacked. She had paused. She had watched. And if a mind like hers could be intrigued by humanity, then perhaps humans were capable of more than just survival. They might be capable of earning respect from even the most alien intelligence in the galaxy. The ship continued its slow retreat, the stars stretching into streaks as the engines pushed them forward. Jalen sat back, letting the moment settle. This was only the beginning. The mission had begun as a simple trap, a task to lure aliens into a kill zone. But now it had transformed into something far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more human. And Jalen Myra, chosen as bait, understood something that no briefing, no training manual, and no simulator could ever teach him. In the vastness of space, humans were unpredictable. Humans were resilient. Humans were alive in ways the hive had never seen. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough to change everything. The moment the cruiser exited the immediate vicinity of the hive, the tension inside didn't ease. Jalen Myra could feel the weight of the Queen's attention lingering, a subtle pressure at the edge of his mind. It was like walking through a storm that hadn't yet arrived, calm, yet charged with danger. He glanced at his squad, noticing the same tight expressions he wore himself. They were trained, skilled, and experienced, but no human training could truly prepare anyone for a mind as vast and alien as the Xyrath Queen's. "Sensors are picking up movement," Rhea Voss said, her voice steady though her hands hovered over the panel. "Multiple scouts. They're faster than we expected, and intelligent. They're not just searching, they're predicting our moves." Jalen nodded, gripping the controls. "Keep calm, they're testing us, not attacking yet. Every move we make tells them something. We need to be unpredictable." The cruiser glided toward a cavernous opening in the hive's outer shell, a space that pulsed with an eerie bioluminescent light. Jalen's instincts told him this was a controlled path, a deliberate design meant to channel intruders. But he wasn't just an intruder, he was human bait, and he would use that to his advantage. The outer hallways of the hive were alive in a way that made the skin crawl. Veins of glowing tissue pulsed rhythmically along the walls, like arteries carrying some unknown life force. The air, or what passed for air, vibrated faintly with low-frequency hums. The ship's sensors struggled to map the environment. It was chaotic yet precise, alien yet intelligent. Every step they took deeper into the hive seemed to echo with the Queen's silent assessment. "Look at this," said Sergeant Curran-Tall, leaning over a console. "The architecture, it's alive, but it's structured, it adapts to us." Jalen allowed himself a grim smile. "Exactly, that's why we have to stay ahead of it. The hive isn't just walls and corridors, it's a thinking organism, and it's thinking about us." The first direct contact came as sudden as a knife in the dark. From the shadows of the twisting corridor, sleek chitinous scouts emerged. They were smaller than the Queen's warriors, agile and equipped with natural weapons that could pierce armor. They moved in perfect unison, circling the cruiser as if weighing it, testing it. "Hold fire!" Jalen shouted. He pressed his palm against his temple, closing his eyes for a moment. Instinctively, he could sense the hive's interest, its observation. Every attack they made could provoke a reaction, and the Queen's attention was still upon him. Any misstep might trigger an all-out assault. The scouts paused, almost in hesitation, and Jalen seized the opportunity. Using the ship's maneuvering thrusters, he guided the cruiser through an unexpected pattern, weaving unpredictably among the hive's organic structures. The scouts adjusted, showing intelligence but also frustration. Jalen recognized the gleam of calculation in their movements. If the Xyrath could feel frustration, this was it. "Humans," a voice seemed to whisper in the edges of his mind, not a sound but a feeling. A probe, delicate but deliberate, the Queen's presence. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't hostile yet, but it was studying him. The squad exchanged glances, even the hardened soldiers felt it. "It's aware of him," whispered Rhea. "Yes," Jalen replied quietly. "And we have to make it see more than just fear. Humans aren't just prey, we're problem solvers, survivors, and we're unpredictable." They entered a larger chamber, one that expanded into a vast organic atrium. Towers of chitin spiraled upward like alien trees, their surfaces covered with pulsing veins of light. The air vibrated with low hums, almost musical in cadence. In the center, a faint glow hinted at the presence of the Queen herself, though she remained unseen. "Deploy the scout drones," Jalen ordered. "We need eyes and ears, but nothing that shows weakness." The drones floated forward, scanning the surroundings. Data streamed back, revealing structures that defied human geometry, corridors that looped in impossible ways, walls that shifted subtly, and surfaces that seemed to watch their every move. The drones themselves reacted oddly, as if the hive were aware of their presence. Some returned with incomplete readings, systems scrambling. "This place isn't just alive," Curran said, his voice tinged with awe. "It's thinking," Jalen exhaled slowly, "and it's thinking about us." Then the Queen acted. Not with aggression, not yet, but with intelligence that stunned even Jalen. The pulsing glow in the center of the chamber shifted, reorganizing the structures around it. The walls contracted and expanded, creating a maze-like pattern that forced the cruiser to maneuver in ways that challenged their understanding. Every instinct Jalen had was tested. Every split-second decision counted. "This is more than defense," Rhea whispered. "It's studying our reactions." "Yes," Jalen said, gripping the controls tightly. "And that's exactly what we want. Let it learn about human ingenuity. Let it see courage under pressure. That's our advantage." They maneuvered deeper into the hive, each turn and adjustment a test of skill, strategy, and nerve. The scouts flitted around them, curious but cautious. Jalen felt the Queen's presence more strongly now, probing, analyzing, weighing. He realized the cruel irony. They had been sent as bait, but the bait had become something else entirely. It was no longer about sacrifice. It was about proving worth. The next challenge came swiftly. The hive itself shifted, the floor rippling beneath them like a living carpet. The cruiser's thrusters struggled to maintain stability, and the squad braced themselves. Jalen's mind raced. This was not a trap designed to kill. They would have been destroyed already. No, this was an examination, a test. He adjusted the ship's trajectory, using the vessel's agility to navigate the treacherous terrain. "Humans don't just survive," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "We adapt, and we fight in ways no one expects." As they progressed, the hive emitted a sudden pulse of psychic energy. It wasn't an attack, but a probing wave brushing against their minds. Each member of the squad felt it differently. Fear, confusion, doubt, emotions that could have crippled them surfaced, only to be suppressed by sheer determination. Jalen felt it as a challenge, a question. "Are you worth attention? Are you more than your species' limits?" He responded instinctively, projecting focus and calm. "We are human," he thought, not in words but in intent. "We survive, we adapt, we think." The hive seemed to pause, the pulse fading slightly. Jalen felt the subtle shift in the psychic presence. The Queen was listening, observing, judging. They reached a chamber unlike the others. Massive, cathedral-like, filled with twisting spires of organic matter that stretched toward the glowing ceiling. The air vibrated with intensity, almost as if the hive were breathing in unison. In the center, a single structure rose, more complex and commanding than anything around it. The Queen was near, though she remained unseen, her influence filling the space. Jalen knew they were close to the heart of the hive. He activated a small external camera to capture the chamber, sending data back to Fleet Command. The response was immediate: static, confusion, awe. The fleet had never encountered structures like this, never imagined a hive with intelligence rivaling their own. "This is incredible," Rhea whispered. "It's not just a home, it's a mind, a living mind." "Yes," Jalen said softly, "and we're inside it." The Queen's attention shifted subtly, brushing against him in waves that were almost gentle. Yet beneath the gentleness lay a calculated intelligence. Jalen understood then that she was assessing not only their skill, but their spirit, their ingenuity, their essence as humans. Every movement, every decision, every reaction mattered. Suddenly, scouts emerged again, but this time they did not attack. They circled, observing, responding to the cruiser's maneuvers. It was a dance, a test of reflexes, strategy, and courage. Jalen guided the ship through unexpected patterns, forcing the scouts to adapt, to react to human unpredictability. Each successful maneuver sent a subtle ripple through the psychic field, and he sensed the Queen's intrigue growing. "This is remarkable," Curran said, voice low. "They're learning from us, not just testing us." "Yes," Jalen replied. "Humans are never predictable. That's our strength. Let them see it. Let them understand it." Hours seemed to pass as they navigated the hive's intricate passages. The Queen's presence remained constant, like a silent observer, analyzing, measuring, considering. Jalen could feel the weight of expectation pressing on him, but he refused to falter. Fear was useless. Only focus, courage, and adaptability would see them through. Finally, they reached a chamber where the hive opened into a massive atrium filled with pulsating lights and undulating structures. Here, the influence of the Queen was undeniable. The air itself vibrated with intelligence, anticipation, and scrutiny. Jalen knew this was the true heart of the hive, the place where all decisions were made and where the Queen's mind was most present. He paused, allowing the ship to hover as he assessed their situation. "This is it," he said quietly. "We are no longer just bait. We are proving what humans are capable of. If we survive this, humanity will gain more than a tactical advantage. We'll show the universe that we are not just prey. We are alive. We are thinkers. We are fighters." The psychic presence intensified, not in attack, but in recognition. Jalen felt it as a silent acknowledgement, a challenge accepted, a test met, and perhaps the first spark of respect. The Queen's attention had shifted from curiosity to consideration, and for the first time, Jalen understood something extraordinary. The mission was no longer a death sentence. It was an opportunity, not just to survive, but to prove humanity's worth to an intelligence beyond comprehension. And in that moment, as the cruiser hovered in the heart of the alien hive, Jalen Myra realized that being chosen as bait might have been the best thing that ever happened to him. Humanity was being watched. Humanity was being tested. And humanity would respond, not with fear, but with brilliance. Jalen Myra felt the hive shift around him as the cruiser hovered in the massive atrium. Every pulse of light, every subtle movement in the walls seemed alive, aware, and attentive. The psychic pressure that had been following him since entering the hive intensified, wrapping around his thoughts like an invisible web. He did not panic. Panic was useless here. Every instinct he had learned over years of training now screamed one truth. This was no longer about being bait. This was about proving humanity's worth. "Status?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. His squad, tense but disciplined, reported quietly, their words underscored by the low hum of the hive. "Scouts are circling, but they're not aggressive," Rhea said. "The hive seems intrigued. It's like it's testing our reactions rather than attacking." Jalen nodded slowly. He had felt that same intrigue, subtle but undeniable, brushing against his mind. The Queen herself was present, though invisible. He could sense her awareness, a weight that was both alien and intelligent. He realized that she was not simply evaluating his skills, she was evaluating him, the human mind, the human spirit. "Prepare the communication module," he said. The squad glanced at him in surprise. Not to negotiate, not yet, but to demonstrate human adaptability. They activated the module, a small device designed to project controlled psychic pulses. Jalen directed it carefully, sending out subtle patterns meant to display intelligence, problem-solving, and creativity. The response was immediate. The walls rippled slightly, the light pulses shifted rhythmically, and the scouts paused, circling in cautious observation. "They're responding," Curran said, his voice low, a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's like they understand." "Yes," Jalen replied, eyes fixed on the shifting patterns around them. "Or they're trying to understand. Either way, we have their attention." For hours, the cruiser moved through the atrium, navigating corridors that bent and twisted in ways humans had no reason to expect. The hive itself seemed to adapt to their movements, shifting walls and passages, creating challenges that tested both the ship's systems and the crew's instincts. Yet every maneuver, every decision, every split-second adaptation reinforced a simple truth. Humans were unpredictable, and unpredictability was survival. The first direct interaction with the Queen came when the cruiser reached a central chamber, larger and more complex than any before. A faint glow marked her presence, radiating intelligence and focus. Jalen felt her assessment as clearly as if she had spoken aloud. "You are different." The words were not verbal but psychic, brushing against his mind in waves of understanding. Jalen responded instinctively, projecting calm, clarity, and determination. "I am human. I adapt. I survive, I think." The Queen's presence pulsed, almost like a heartbeat, and the walls shifted in response, creating an intricate display of light and movement. The scouts paused, their movements synchronized with the psychic signals. It was a test and a demonstration. "Look at that," Rhea whispered. "It's like she's studying us." "Yes," Jalen replied, "and we are showing her what humans are capable of, not with violence but with intelligence." The hive's response intensified. Corridors bent into patterns that challenged the cruiser's navigation systems, and organic barriers emerged, forcing Jalen to improvise constantly. Each decision, each maneuver was observed, measured, and analyzed by the Queen. The psychic presence shifted, probing deeper into his thoughts, emotions, and memories. It was unnerving, yet exhilarating. He realized that humanity's true strength lay not in brute force, but in creativity, adaptability, and courage under pressure. Suddenly, a surge of energy from the Queen struck the cruiser. It was not an attack, but a challenge, a test of reflexes, intellect, and spirit. Systems flickered under the psychic wave, and the squad braced themselves. Jalen responded with precision, navigating through the hive's obstacles while simultaneously projecting signals that demonstrated ingenuity. The The Queen's presence pulsed in response, acknowledging his efforts. "They're impressed," Curran said, awe in his voice. "Or at least intrigued." "Yes," Jalen said quietly, "and intrigue is opportunity, we have to seize it." The next stage of the test was unexpected. The Queen manipulated the chamber itself, creating a labyrinth of shifting walls and platforms. The cruiser had to navigate vertical spaces, tight corridors, and twisting passages that defied normal geometry. Every movement was a test, every decision a reflection of human capability. Jalen guided the ship with precision, relying on intuition, training, and the unique adaptability that defined humanity. Rhea adjusted the communication module, projecting signals that mirrored their maneuvers. The Hive responded, adapting in real time, creating an intricate interplay between human creativity and alien intelligence. Jalen realized they were engaged in a form of dialogue, not with words, but with actions, reactions, and adaptation. Humanity was being measured, evaluated, and acknowledged in a way no other species had ever experienced. Hours passed in this tense interplay. The Hive tested them relentlessly, yet the squad adapted. Each challenge they overcame reinforced the Queen's curiosity, her assessment shifting from mere observation to recognition. Jalen felt it subtly, a psychic acknowledgement of respect for human resilience. Finally, they reached the heart of the Hive, a colossal chamber where the Queen's presence was undeniable. The air vibrated with intelligence, anticipation, and scrutiny. Organic structures radiated from the center, spiraling like towers of living crystal. Light pulsed rhythmically, reflecting the Hive's consciousness and the Queen's focus. Jalen hovered the cruiser near the center, sensing the Queen's attention directly. She did not attack. She did not threaten. She observed, assessing, calculating. It was a test of character, intellect, and spirit. He realized that the Hive's warriors, scouts, and structures were extensions of her mind, and she was weighing every human action against her understanding of intelligence, survival, and ingenuity. "Jalen," Rhea said softly. "She's communicating, not with words but feeling, understanding." "Yes," he replied, "and we are responding not with fear, not with violence, but with what makes humans remarkable, our minds, our courage, our adaptability." The Queen's psychic presence intensified, brushing against his thoughts in waves of curiosity. Jalen responded with clarity, projecting his intent, determination, and awareness. "We are human. We survive. We think. We adapt." A subtle shift rippled through the chamber. The walls pulsed with light, the organic structures adjusting as if nodding in recognition. The scouts moved aside, giving the cruiser unobstructed passage. Jalen realized this was unprecedented. The Queen had acknowledged them not as prey, but as entities worthy of attention. He seized the opportunity. "We want to show you," he projected mentally, not as a threat, but as a statement. "We are more than survival instincts. We are problem solvers. We are thinkers. We are humans, and we can coexist even when our species are different." The Queen's response was immediate yet subtle. The chamber pulsed with light, a complex pattern that resonated with the cruiser's communication module. The interaction was not words, not even language. It was understanding, recognition, and evaluation. Jalen felt a spark of hope. For the first time, humanity's ingenuity was acknowledged by an alien intelligence, vast, ancient, and powerful. "Do you feel that?" Curran asked, voice tinged with wonder. "It's like she understands us." "Yes," Jalen said, heart racing. "And understanding is the first step toward respect. We've survived not by hiding, not by fighting blindly, but by showing who we are. That's our advantage." The Queen's attention remained fixed on them, her presence intense but not hostile. The Hive adjusted, creating a path that led toward a central platform. Jalen guided the cruiser carefully, moving with precision while projecting further signals of intelligence and adaptability. Each action, each decision, reinforced humanity's unpredictability, creativity, and courage. As they approached the platform, the psychic presence shifted again, probing deeper into Jalen's thoughts. He responded instinctively, projecting clarity, calm, and determination. "I am human, we survive, we adapt, we think. We can coexist with intelligence greater than our own." The response was immediate. Light pulses intensified, the organic structures radiated recognition, and the scouts aligned in formation, guiding the cruiser to the center. The Queen's presence was unmistakable now, a focused awareness that filled the chamber. Jalen realized that this was not a trap, not an execution, but a test, and they had passed. Prepare to report, Jalen said quietly. Humanity has not just survived, we've been acknowledged. And that changes everything. Rhea adjusted the module, recording the interaction. This will be invaluable. The fleet needs to see this. Humanity, we're not just prey, we're remarkable. Yes, Jalen said, eyes fixed on the pulsating light of the Queen's presence. And now we need to return, but not as victims, not as bait, as representatives of what humanity can achieve when faced with the unknown. The Queen's psychic presence lingered as they moved back through the atrium. Jalen felt it like a silent promise, an acknowledgement of value, a recognition of courage, and perhaps the beginning of something extraordinary. The Hive had tested them, pushed them to the limits, and in return, humanity had shown its brilliance. As the cruiser navigated toward the exit, the squad felt a shared sense of awe. They had faced an intelligence beyond comprehension and had not only survived, but demonstrated what it meant to be human. Courage, ingenuity, adaptability, and determination, these were the traits that set them apart. And now, even an alien queen, a mind beyond understanding, had taken notice. Hours later, as they finally left the immediate reach of the Hive, Jalen allowed himself a deep breath. The mission was far from over. The fleet would soon engage, the outer ambush was still active, and danger was never far in this part of space. But for the first time, he felt something profound. Humanity's place in the galaxy was not merely as prey or expendable soldiers. It was as thinkers, as problem solvers, as a species capable of extraordinary ingenuity and courage. This changes everything, Curran said quietly. Yes, Jalen agreed. And it's only the beginning. The Queen has seen us, she's aware, and that awareness, that is opportunity. The cruiser moved steadily away from the Hive, the stars stretching into streaks as engines engaged. The beacon continued to transmit, signaling the fleet that the trap was in place. But Jalen's mind was not on the fleet, not yet. It was on the Queen, on the Hive, and on the realization that humans were no longer just targets. They were forces to be reckoned with. And in that understanding, Jalen felt a spark of hope. The Queen had not destroyed them. She had observed, evaluated, and recognized. Humanity's ingenuity, courage, and adaptability had been tested and proven. The mission had begun as a simple act of baiting, but it had transformed into something far greater. Jalen Myra, chosen as bait, had not only survived the Hive's test, he had redefined what it meant to be human in the eyes of an alien intelligence. And the implications of that recognition were as vast as the galaxy itself. The cruiser emerged from the outer edges of the Hive with the beacon still transmitting, a faint pulse in the darkness of space that signaled the fleet waiting in ambush. Jalen Myra's hands rested lightly on the controls, but his mind was focused entirely on the Hive and the Queen who had observed him. The psychic presence had not faded. It lingered like a shadow, a quiet acknowledgement of human ingenuity and courage. This is it, Rhea said quietly, her eyes scanning the starfield ahead. Fleet is in position. Once the signal is received, they'll engage. Yes, Jalen replied, but engagement is not the goal. Survival and leverage are. We've been observed, we've been acknowledged. That gives us more than just tactical advantage. It gives us understanding. The cruiser glided closer to the designated strike zone. The fleet, massive and coordinated, was ready. Human warships waited in formation, weapons primed, engines humming in unison. They had prepared for slaughter, expecting that the Xyrath would swarm them without hesitation. But Jalen knew the truth. The Queen had paused, she had watched, and her curiosity now extended to the humans beyond the cruiser. As the signal from the beacon pulsed through the Hive, alarms echoed across the fleet. Ships pivoted, weapons systems activated, and commanders shouted orders. The swarm was approaching, but it was not moving as predictably as they had been trained to expect. Jalen could feel the Queen's presence manipulating the flow, not attacking outright but guiding the test, observing reactions, measuring human responses. Sir, Curran said, tension thick in his voice, they're hesitant, not aggressive, almost cautious. Yes, Jalen said, eyes fixed on the approaching swarm. And that is the window we need. Humanity survives not because we're the strongest, but because we're clever, because we're adaptable, because we're unpredictable. The first wave of Xyrath warriors entered the ambush zone, sleek, deadly, and coordinated. The fleet opened fire, unleashing a storm of laser beams and plasma bursts. Yet the Xyrath did not falter entirely. Their formation shifted intelligently, adapting to human strategy in ways that suggested awareness beyond simple instinct. The Queen was watching, guiding them subtly, testing the limits of human coordination under fire. Targeting patterns are irregular, Rhea said. They're learning as they engage. Adjust fire accordingly. Jalen nodded. Yes, let them see that humans respond. We fight with strategy, with creativity, with adaptability. The battle unfolded with a rhythm unlike anything the fleet had anticipated. Humans anticipated, adapted, and improvised in ways that the Xyrath did not fully expect. Ships moved in unpredictable formations, tactics changed in real time, and pilots executed maneuvers that seemed impossible. Every success, every narrowly avoided attack, was noted in the Queen's psychic awareness, rippling through the hive as recognition of human ingenuity. Amidst the chaos, Jalen guided the cruiser closer to the hive, into the very heart of the outer defenses. The Queen's presence intensified, brushing against his mind, not with hostility but with curiosity. He realized then that the battle was no longer a simple conflict of species. It had become a demonstration of human capability, a display meant to be observed, measured, and perhaps respected. "Sir," Curran shouted, pointing to the swarm ahead. "They're splitting, part of them are retreating, part advancing." "Yes," Jalen said calmly, "that's our advantage. We control the engagement by showing them unpredictability. Humans are never easy to predict." The fleet pressed forward, exploiting the gaps, while the Xyrath adjusted their tactics in real time. Every maneuver, every split-second decision was a conversation across species. Humans adapted, survived, and fought in ways that the Xyrath had not anticipated. And through it all, the Queen's presence remained, observing, calculating, and for the first time, judging humanity as equals in strategy, intellect, and courage. Then came the turning point. A massive Xyrath strike force attempted to encircle the fleet. The ships braced for annihilation. Yet Jalen acted. Using the psychic signals he had learned to interpret from the Queen, he projected patterns that disrupted the hive's coordination, creating confusion in the swarm. His squad watched in awe as the Xyrath faltered, their movements imperfect for the first time. "Human intuition," Jalen whispered, almost to himself. "They can calculate tactics, but they can't predict courage, creativity, and adaptability." The fleet seized the opportunity, pressing the attack, exploiting the confusion, and forcing the Xyrath to retreat from the ambush zone. Explosions lit the darkness of space, the hive's outer defenses shattered by human strategy, skill, and ingenuity. Jalen could feel the Queen's presence shift, no longer probing, no longer testing. They had earned recognition. And then a moment of clarity. The Queen's awareness focused entirely on Jalen. No longer was it a distant observation. It was direct, personal, and unmistakable. He felt her curiosity, her assessment, and a strange acknowledgement of respect. Humanity had survived the trial, not merely by brute force, but by demonstrating the qualities that made them extraordinary. "Sir," Rhea said, voice trembling slightly. She's not attacking anymore. The swarm is retreating." "Yes," Jalen replied, "and that is what we wanted, not destruction but recognition. Humanity is not expendable. Humanity is remarkable." The cruiser moved slowly toward the hive, guided by the Queen's subtle influence. Jalen felt her attention as a presence, powerful and intelligent. He realized that she was offering an unspoken truce, an acknowledgement that humanity had passed the test. The Xyrath swarm did not pursue them further. They maintained distance, observing rather than attacking, learning rather than destroying. "This is unprecedented," Curran said. "We've never had a species respond like this." "Yes," Jalen said softly, "and that is the power of being human. We survive not by strength alone, but by intelligence, courage, and adaptability. That is what the universe sees now." As the fleet regrouped, Jalen reflected on the mission. What had begun as a simple act of baiting had transformed into something extraordinary. Humanity had not just survived the hive, it had demonstrated its essence. They had shown creativity, courage, and ingenuity in ways that even an alien queen could respect. The Queen's presence lingered as the cruiser moved toward safe space. Jalen projected a final thought, not as a threat, not as a challenge, but as a message. "We are human. We survive, we adapt, we think, and we honor life even when it is different from our own." There was no reply in words, no recognition in sound. But he felt it as clearly as he had felt her presence from the beginning. A subtle acknowledgement, a shift in awareness that spoke of curiosity, respect, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. The fleet cheered quietly as the Xyrath retreated, their ships intact, their mission a success. But Jalen knew that the true victory was not tactical. It was something deeper, something enduring. Humanity had survived, yes, but more than that, humanity had been acknowledged by a mind beyond comprehension. The Queen had seen them and in seeing had recognized their value. Rhea glanced at him, her expression a mixture of relief and awe. "You did it, Jalen, we did it. Humanity, we've shown them what we are capable of." "Yes," he said, eyes fixed on the fading presence of the Queen in the distance. "And this is only the beginning. The galaxy now knows that humans are not just prey. We are thinkers, we are fighters, and we are alive in ways no other species can fully understand." The cruiser moved toward open space, engines humming softly. Jalen allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The mission had begun as a death sentence. He had been chosen as bait, sent into a hive where survival seemed impossible. But he had turned it into something far greater. By demonstrating human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability, he had not only survived but had earned the recognition of one of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. The squad relaxed, tension easing from their bodies. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, not only through skill but through the qualities that defined humanity. Every instinct, every decision, every act of courage had contributed to a triumph that was far more profound than any battle report could capture. And in the quiet aftermath, Jalen understood something fundamental. Survival was only the first step. Recognition was the second. And the final step, perhaps the most important, was the opportunity to build understanding across species, to demonstrate that intelligence and courage could bridge even the greatest divides in the universe. As the cruiser returned to the fleet, Jalen projected one final thought, a reflection of humanity's essence. We fight, we think, we adapt, we survive. And in doing so, we honor life, intelligence, and the possibility of understanding across all worlds. The Queen did not respond in words, but Jalen felt the resonance of acknowledgement, a quiet presence that lingered even as the cruiser moved farther from the hive. It was a promise of consideration, a recognition that humanity was more than expendable bait, more than fragile flesh in a dangerous galaxy. Humanity was alive, brilliant, and worthy of respect. Fleet Command awaited them, eager for reports of the engagement. Jalen shared the details, emphasizing not just the tactical victory, but the unprecedented recognition by the Queen. Humans had survived and triumphed, yes, but more importantly, they had shown the universe that their ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were forces beyond simple measurement. The ships of the fleet moved in formation, celebrating a victory that was more than military, it was existential. Humanity had not only survived the hive's trial, but had demonstrated qualities that made them formidable, respected, and above all, alive in ways that no other species could fully comprehend. Jalen Myra looked out into the darkness of space, the faint glimmer of stars stretching endlessly before him. The Queen's presence lingered in memory, a reminder that intelligence, courage, and adaptability could change the course of history, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. And in that moment, he understood the true meaning of being chosen as bait. It was not about sacrifice. It was about proving what humanity could achieve, showing that survival was not enough, and that the human spirit, resilient, adaptable, and brilliant, could command recognition from the most alien and powerful minds in the galaxy. For the first time in his life, Jalen Myra smiled, not with relief, not with triumph alone, but with understanding. Humanity had been tested, challenged, and observed, and humanity had emerged not merely as survivors, but as a species worthy of respect, ingenuity, and hope. The cruiser glided into open space, engines quieting as they approached safe territory. The fleet followed, weapons still ready but the immediate threat gone. Jalen felt the weight of the mission lift slightly, replaced by a sense of profound accomplishment. They had not just survived, they had changed the way the galaxy would see them. And somewhere, deep within the hive, the Queen's awareness lingered, a quiet presence that had been altered by the encounter. She had observed courage, intelligence, and unpredictability, and in doing so had acknowledged humanity. The universe was not yet fully understood, but one truth had been established. Humans were extraordinary, and they had the power to shape their destiny even in the face of unimaginable alien minds. Jalen Myra leaned back in his seat, letting the hum of the cruiser fill the silence. The mission had begun as bait, but it had ended as revelation. Humanity had survived, adapted, and proven its value not just to itself, but to the galaxy at large. And in that understanding lay the promise of a future where humans were no longer merely observers of the universe's dangers but active participants, capable of shaping the course of history with courage, intelligence, and unyielding resolve.